time, but for the work, man.
Yeah.
It's worthy.
Thank you.
All right. We're on? Well, how about that? We are live right now on Facebook Live, looking at the screen. Welcome, my friends, to Live Inspired with John O'Leary. The band Journey is one of the greatest rock bands in all history. They enjoyed 7 consecutive multi-platinum albums between 78 and 1987. They had 18 top 40 singles, including classics like Wheel in the Sky, Faithfully, Open Arms, and a much lesser known Don't Stop Believin'. They've also sold more than 75 million records around the world, making them one of the best-selling bands of all time. USA Today has called them one of the top 5 bands in U.S. history. Unbelievable. And in 2017, this band was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Well, friends, the keyboardist, the songwriter, and I believe the heart and the soul of Journey is with me live on Live Inspired with John O'Leary's podcast today. We'll be talking about Journey. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about the babies or bad English.
Sure.
But more than that, we'll be discussing challenges, tragedies, influences, mistakes, overcoming, redemption. In other words, we're going to be talking about life.
Life, yeah.
So, my friends, whether you are wearing your 1982 Journey Escape Tour t-shirt right at this very moment, or you hate all things rock and roll, you are going to love this visit with musician, with author, with son, with father and friend Jonathan Cain. Jonathan Cain, welcome to Live Inspired with John O'Leary.
Thank you, John. Thanks for having me.
Man,
it's
I
an
am
honored to be here.
We heard that the band Journey was coming to St. Louis, and I have a friend who knows you through another life, and exactly. I wondered if you might be able to make a little bit of time for us, and here we are.
God sure opened a window, I'll tell you what. I was wondering what I was going to do today. It was either going to be golfing or you, and I'd rather be.
You made the right call.
I'd rather be here with you than on the golf course.
I'm glad you're here at the golf course. Tomorrow night, you're going to be rocking out with a bunch of my friends at a packed Busch Stadium.
We hope so, yeah. We're looking forward to it.
Well, it's on. And for those who think, well, it's nice that there are singers and songwriters out there and musicians who are extraordinarily successful, they need to also understand you didn't come out this way. The journey toward the stadium rocking out tomorrow night at Busch Stadium in St. Louis, Missouri wasn't always the Jonathan Cain story.
No.
So what I wanted to do for our listeners and our viewers today is to take them back to the beginning. You were born in Chicago, is that right?
That's right, yeah. Born in Chicago. My father was a printer from the South, Arkansas. And my mom, of course, he came to Chicago out of the Army, to learn the craft of printing. Fell in love with my mother. They were deeply in love, and I guess I happened, like a mistake. I figured out looking at their wedding picture years later that, wait a minute, she's pregnant with me here,
That's right.
And so I had a very young mother. She was only 19, and my father, barely had 8th grade education.
Right.
And so they worked together to get my father into the Printers Union, to pass all the tests, to get his reading and writing up to snuff. I mean, they spent a lot of time together, but just total devotional love.
You wrote an entire book that I have read and deeply was moved by called Don't Stop Believin'. You talk about your mom and dad in there.
Yeah.
Briefly here until the folks have an opportunity to run out to the store and get this thing. Talk about your mom. It sounded like an unusual relationship.
She grew up with 3 brothers, and her father was a whaler on a Norwegian whaling ship. Very interesting. And it was rough. She had a rough upbringing, and then her brothers all left for World War II. Mm-hmm. One was in Air Force, 2 were in the Navy, and so they were kind of abandoned. And then her father is out at sea, and sometimes he would come home, and sometimes he wouldn't.
That's right.
And then when he would come home, it wouldn't be so good, because he'd be inebriated or
That's
something. Right. And so she grew up around a lot of brokenness, and it was hard for her having me. I don't think she was ready for me at 19, So it was kind of this, I grew up in tough love, you're going to get tough love. I'm going to show you what I went through, as a kid. And these 3 brothers were all different personalities, very loving, but they didn't even want my dad to marry her because he was Catholic.
Right.
And they were Lutheran. And they said, you're not going to marry that hillbilly Catholic, And so there was this contention over their marriage. And my father, being the prevailer overcomer that he was. Just he rode it through. He got close to the brothers and said, "Listen, man, I'm your brother. I'm just like you, man. I love Chicago. I'm going to make it. Your sister's going to be fine. All is good." But there was always that sort of rough edge to my mom, and she would demand a lot, expect a lot, and in the end, I needed it.
Yeah, right.
I needed it because my father was a big teddy bear. He was like, but he was also, you got to get on task. So they were a great blend. I'd probably get more hugs from my dad than my mom.
Your father clearly was a mighty influence in your life all the way through. We'll keep bringing him up as we go through your life story.
Yeah, Leonard.
Give the folks listening right now a sense for who your dad was. As a boy, what was Dad like when you were a little guy?
He was my movie star. Like I'd say, like Humphrey Bogart. When you see Humphrey Bogart, he had that low voice. He had that charm. He dressed impeccably. He had, wore the fedora hat. I mean, he had the tie, the coat, the whole thing. Suits. He went to work dressed for success. And my aunt Louise called him Duke. He was known as Duke. And he could charm the pants off anybody. I mean, he ended up working as a phone guy for the printer shop. So they would call him, and he would get the order and schmooze these guys, all the customers, with his... He could have been on radio, my dad. He was a charmer.
He believed in you from the beginning.
Yeah.
He also had...
lucky for me.
And us.
Yeah.
He also had an attractive, contagious faith that you noticed as a little guy. And one of the things that really surprised me about the book is that you grew up very faithful, and in fact, you wanted to be a priest as a young boy.
Absolutely. He led me to this church, Our Lady of the Angels, and he said, "We're going to go to church here." And I watched him, probably 5 years old, kneel down with his little missal and pray devoutly. Close his eyes, and at some point the tears would start coming down his cheeks, and I'm like, "Wow, he's crying." I said, "Dad, why?" So I asked him after the Mass, I said, "Were you crying in church?" He goes, "Those were tears for Jesus." I'm like, "Holy cow, that's powerful." I'm like, "Can you teach me to pray? And who is Jesus?" And I was very interested very early, in a relationship that I was jealous of that. I could see he was transcended, kneeling down in that pew. And he said, "Listen, man, you just got to call for him and tell him that, he's your Savior and all sins will be forgiven." And I'm like, wow, okay, I'm doing it. So I kept praying, Jesus, Jesus, for a good solid year until finally I thought I had a breakthrough, with my prayer, and that I had this warm glow inside. And he said, "John, that's kind of it. You're onto something." So when I had my first communion at 7 years old, it was pretty supernatural. It really wasn't a great thing for me to already have a relationship. And that's when I said, after communion, I was so overwhelmed with the Spirit. And, I loved all the priests at our church. They were such mighty men, could preach the gospel like nobody's business. And I said, I want to be like these guys. And they get to sing in the choir, Spencer's back, and then I love Latin, and so I ended up being a choir boy. I sang Gregorian Latin chants and was in the choir. I didn't quite get the altar boy thing down, but I did. I was in the choir for years until my voice cracked.
Well, I'm glad it cracked because it opened you up to new opportunities in
Yes.
time. But it would be some valleys and peaks as we move toward that. Jonathan, when I was in second grade, my teacher's name was Sister Kathleen, and she was tough. Man, she was the toughest teacher I've ever had in my entire life. Woo. We had a fire drill, and I was apparently goofing off on the recess playground area, and we came back in, and she lit me up.
Yeah.
And I mean, seriously, I'll never forget what she said. And then she started talking about a story that happened in Chicago at this little school called Our Lady of Angels, and she talked about a fire that spread through the school, and those who did not follow the directions appropriately, many of them ended up dying. Yeah. She talked about, I think, 92 kids burned to death.
And 3 nuns.
3 nuns, 50 other kids injured at one level or another. Traumatic story that transformed this community in Chicago. And I'll never forget her telling me this.
That's wild.
It is wild. And, I got burned myself 2 years later, which is wild. But what's most wild today is I'm seated across from a guy who was there. You were there on that first day of December.
I was there, and it was eerie because cold, crisp day, sunny. All of a sudden, we smell smoke, and yet there's no alarm that goes off, and yet we're trotted out like it's going to be a fire drill. I know it's 2:20 now. It's 40 minutes from the time. We don't have fire drills, and we all smell the smoke. We go, well, it's probably nothing. It was probably, they'll put it out, and then I waited for the fire escape to come down because I'm looking, at the school. We're outside on Avers Avenue facing the school, and I don't see the fire escape
Right.
down like we normally would see it. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's not working. There's more and more smoke, and there's more and more, and then we start seeing flames, and what had happened was the basement had this drum full of paper, and it was right underneath the cold intake pipe that went up to the roof. So the fire had started from the roof, 2.5 stories. It was an old building that was grandfathered in, for fire code, because they were, built so like in the 30s or 40s, I think. So they didn't have to, do any codes. And we found out later that they didn't even have fire alarm hooked to the fire station. It wasn't even. It just, and it didn't finally ring until one of the teachers rang it, and I kept waiting for the fire escape to come down. It was one of those old school ones, that you have a chain and no kids are coming. And well, we come to find out later that the sister forgot the key that day, and the janitor had to, with Pastor Joe, had to crawl up the stairs in all this smoke, and heat, and give the sister the key so they can. A lot more kids would have died had that heroic thing not happened, But, I had a Mickey Mouse watch. I kept looking at it going, where are the
Where's
fire
everybody?
department?
Yes.
Where is anybody, And surely, I'll tell you something. I used to do the rooster tails with the fire hydrants, pop a fire hydrant and put a board and a rope around it and make a big old fountain.
I know exactly what you're talking
In
about.
the middle of the street.
You got in trouble for
and
it.
The fire department got us one year because it was a drought.
Right.
Well, this guy, Lieutenant Woznicki, he knew who I was, and I knew he was only 2 miles away. I'm like, where is he? Where's the lieutenant? He's not coming with his truck. Well, there was a mix-up in calling the fire department. There's discrepancies when they called him. So by the time the Chicago Fire Department got there, it was a 5-alarm fire, and kids were jumping out of the second story onto the pavement. And now you can imagine the scene where the parents are coming to pick up their children, hysterical. My children, where's my child? Where is he? And it's surreal. It was so surreal. I was like, this at 8 years old, what the heck? And I kept saying, Jesus, you can't let this happen. You cannot let this happen. But he was there with us, and
How did that?
cried the tears.
How did that change you as a third grader?
God, devastated. It's just facing evil. That's evil. That's chaos. And when you're only 8, that's like going to World War II. That's getting a taste of what World War II was like, being in, in that kind of death. Like one day of bombing in the trenches, you're going to lose 90 guys, right? And these kids, are innocent of any sin. And they taught us about hell and purgatory and everything like that. And I'm trying to work it out. I'm like, how in the world does this make any sense? And we haven't really learned about the enemy or hell. But I gotta say, I will not even give the devil credit for that fire. No, he had none. That was just pure chaos that happened, and it was evil sent. I'll say it was evil sent, but that fire, that whole thing was circumstances that led to negligence. There should have been. You have that many children in a school, you need to change your protocol. And so I got to say, to some degree, that organization should have been on top of it, and they weren't, and we paid for it, and that's what happened. You know,
I got
and we
emotional
changed the fire code
throughout the whole
for
country.
the entire world.
That's a fact.
Came to Chicago to find out what went wrong. You know, and so I can say those 92 children that died that day were messengers. That something so horrific would never happen again in a school. You know, and it took me a long time to work that out, John. Yeah, but I can say that their lives were not in vain. They gave their lives, you know, and it changed things, you know. So out of pain, something new is born. Amen.
You had a bombardier jacket with your father's badges and medals all around this thing that you loved as a second and third grader. You wore it to school that day.
Yeah.
You went home. A couple days later, they opened up the school so you can come back and get your backpacks. I still can't believe they let you back in to get your belongings, but they did.
Well, they had one room in the convent next door. It wasn't in the school. They had taken. What was really surreal about that day was we had to go to church on Sunday, and I believe the fire was on like a Friday or a Thursday. And so we go back to church, and there's this skeleton of a school next to it, all just fallen down and, I mean, dilapidated. It's a brick building, but it's just gone, you know. It was so intense. And then there's a big pile of clothes, you know, right there on Avers. I mean, I'm talking a mountain of clothes that they had to sort out and take into the convent, where they would hang everything up, and then you could go identify them, and that's how they did it. But that was the hardest part of being in that parish, was facing that building every Sunday, going to get the bus every Monday, where we would go to satellite schools looking at that thing, and they left it up for a good 4 or 5 months because they had investigators trying to find out
What happened?
Yeah.
You found the jacket that you loved.
Found it, yeah.
Tell me what happened after you found it.
I put it on, and it smelled, and it reeked. It reeked of what I had, you know, inhaled that day. You know, I was inhaling death, you know, and fire and ashes and soot, and, you know, I just, as much as I wanted, I wasn't going to bring that in my house. And so my mom asked me, what'd you do with it? And I said, I left it there.
Right.
As hard as it was for me, I told the sister, I said, destroy it. Destroy it.
You left that. It changed you. It changed the entire community and the world, for better and for worse. It changed everybody after that.
It did, yeah.
You turn inward. You turn toward music.
Yeah.
What was it about music that you found so attractive?
Oh God, my father recognized my ability to learn, you know, the hit parade at a young age. I was singing all the songs. Yeah, I was like his little, you know, jukebox. I'd sing Johnny Ray, I'd sing Rosemary Clooney, you know, whoever, you know, was in the 50s, Mambo Italiano. I knew the words to all this stuff, you know. And so he recognized that music was there, and he'd take me to this bar called Pat's Tavern, and I had a piano, and I'd start playing the boogie woogie, and he goes, who taught you that? I said, I don't know, I'm just listening. I think I got it. You know, he said, that's pretty close, you know. So he said, let's go for music. And he took me to music school. It was one of those deals where pick out whatever you can pick out. I can't afford a piano because it's too expensive, but, you know. So I tried the guitar. My hands were too small. So I said, I'll take that accordion. I was this little 8-year-old kid, and they had a strap for me that would actually hold the accordion on me so it wouldn't fall off. That's how little I was.
So you had a teacher, and I'm going to back into the story by telling the audience this. My sister, who is listening live and watching live right now, her name is Amy.
All right.
Last name O'Leary, but her now married name, Geraci. Love it. Her family on the other side comes from Chicago. My brother-in-law, Joe's great uncle, is a guy named Vince Geraci, who taught kids the accordion.
Oh, my.
Do you know anybody who might be in this room that he taught?
Might be me.
Can you believe? So I'm reading this to my brother-in-law. And I'm like, dude, is this the same family? And it was. And he, of course, used to brag about one of his pupils.
No, he was, he was, the consummate musician, and teacher and encourager. And he got my father, after one of the lessons, brought my father into the studio and said, I want to show you something. And he played a note, and he made me turn my back. He said, what note is that? I said, it's a C. And he played another one. That's an A flat. That's a B flat. And he looked at my father and says, you know what that is? Perfect pitch. Your son is very gifted. And the only problem is he makes up notes that he's not supposed to play. He says he's improvising, he's reading the music, but he's playing notes that aren't in the paper. And I got to get him to look more at the music,
Right.
because I would get lost and just kind of ramble a little bit. It's not on the paper. But he really encouraged me, and what I was impressed with was he was making a living as a musician.
That's right.
I had first encounter at 8 years old with a professional musician. And I saw him, with his tuxedo, suspenders on. He was getting ready to put his tie and go downtown and play. I'm like, I want to be like him. The priest thing, I don't know about anymore. That got wrecked in the fire. It really did. It wrecked me. And yet the music was, I was fascinated with what he knew. I wanted to know what he knew, and I wanted to play like he played.
Well, you started, and you, I believe it was in 7th or 8th grade, you started, some people have heard of Journey. Everyone's heard of the Futurists, right? the massive, huge smashing success out of Chicagoland.
Yeah.
That's I believe that's your first band.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, at what point during that wild ride, Futurists playing in the back of mixers and bars at the Sheraton, these kind of little acts, did you come on stage and recognize, dude, I think I can do this? It's not just a high school act or a late grade school thing. I actually have. It
felt like I belonged, and I have to say my brother Tom was such a huge part of my musical journey, because he never had a lesson, I don't think, a music lesson, and yet he was such a natural. I could tell that he was dying to be a drummer, and so I remember when I got my accordion, my professional accordion, the electric one, I made sure that he had a snare drum and a bass drum and a cymbal, and I said, no, you put it in the basement and we're going to play together, and so he and I would just jam for hours downstairs. My mom was like, oh my God, it's so loud. I said, you'll get over it, don't worry, and he really was this wonder kid at 14 years old, incredible groove, could play just about anything. And then I taught him play a little trumpet, and he was playing some trumpet and playing the drums and singing along, and he, a real entertainer. I mean, we were like the Smothers Brothers, but we were super young, more like, a young version of that, just a duo. And that's how, we started. I kind of left the Futurists because it was harder to get everybody together. With Tommy and I, we could just go do it.
Yeah.
But it was fun. But I couldn't say I wouldn't be here without my brother being by my side all those years. We must have played for at least 15, 18 years together. Yeah.
For those who are just tuning in right now, we have right over here Jonathan Cain. He is an author, songwriter, musician. You may have heard of one of his bands called The Futurists, but also Journey is a band he's even better known for. He's got a beautiful book out called Don't Stop Believin'. You eventually make a move you move around quite a bit, but eventually out to L.A.
Yeah.
What was it about Los Angeles that attracted you?
Well, this is God. This is what God did for us. We were playing in this little bowling alley, Kankakee. I mean, it was, a really not a great gig, but they were paying us decent. And in walks a friend of my manager's from L.A. His name is Dennis Nicholas, and he's representing Wolfman Jack Management. Wolfman Jack was a big radio DJ, star of American Graffiti, huge personality on radio back in those days in the 60s and 70s. And so he was there because my manager at the time, our manager, had asked him to come hear some music that we play because I was writing songs. So one set we got to play three original songs, and he was so impressed that he said, you need to come out with Don Kelly, who's my boss, and we're going to hook you up. We're going to make you a star. I'm like, come on. This isn't happening, So we decide, take the big leap. We're going to leave Chicago. I'm going to leave my 12-year-old brother, Hal. Broke my heart I had to leave him for all those years, but and get our Chevy vans and head to LA. So we get to LA, and what do we got? We have everything he said. Not only We have a place to live. We have a producer. We have a studio, and we have this incredible guy Don Kelly and Wolfman Jack. All trying to make it work for us. And when I think about it now, it just doesn't happen. To most kids that have a dream like that, you talk about being set up. Are you kidding me? And I was so like, wow, this is incredible. I'm going to get to go into the studio. Then they bring this producer guy in, J.C. Phillips, and he's made all these great records. And I'm like, I'm going to learn something here, And he was the one, Don Kelly, Wolfman's manager, that changed my name to Jonathan Cain.
Okay.
Yeah, he said, this Frege name is not going to work. No one's going to get it. So come back with a name tomorrow.
Well, you came back with
So I said Jonathan Cain. He's like, let's see, how are we going to spell it? Well, there's the Abel and Cain thing. I guess it won't matter in show business.
They probably loved it, man. And you said set up, and it worked, and the miracle of it all, and yes to all of that. But it wasn't easy, and it wasn't overnight.
No, and we ended up on American Bandstand, which with the single, I had this little label called October Records, and they wanted to put it out. And so there it is. I get, I'm on the charts in L.A. At like 20-some years old. It's crazy.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
And shortly after that, you're moving beer arounds and back alleys, and you're selling records and moving speakers.
Surely, if you make the Dick Clark show, American Bandstand, surely you'll have gigs and people will be calling you for, And we were back in the pizza parlors, And so I got to the point where, like, you know what, this club thing is wearing me down, and I've got to focus on my songwriting. And my father had always encouraged that. He said, don't play the blues and the jazz, write the songs. You're going to make the money, and you're good at it. And so I said, all right, Dad. Because I wanted to be a journalist, too. I mean, that was the other... I actually got accepted at Northwestern University in the School of Journalism, which was incredible. I just didn't have the money to go. My father couldn't afford to help me. And, he was making more money than the student loan would allow. And Northwestern is pretty ritzy, neighborhood. Mm. So I often wonder what would happen if I would have went to journalism class. But I could write, I was the editor of our newspaper in high school. So the writing kind of came naturally to me, and I had a couple of great English teachers in high school that kind of wrangled me in a little bit, and said, you have something to say, and as I learned my way through writing with the producers in LA, and I found that, okay, this is a world, that I can actually survive in. I could live in this world, and of course Elton John and Bruce Springsteen were huge influences on me. Bruce especially, with his early work, and he kind of took what Dylan did and made it okay to sing about your hometown and sing about your girlfriend and your car and your neighborhood and call it, Jungle Land. And I was like, come on, this guy's tremendous, His influence on me was huge, and all of the great music that was coming out at that time, Procol Harum, Moody Blues, those are the bands that I had my eye on. Jethro Tull, they were like, wow, this isn't Louie anymore, This isn't Hang On Sloopy.
As attracted as you were to those guys and that music, the realities of being beat down, failing, and not getting the break weighed on you.
Right.
And the idea of working in a speaker store, doing a job that you were not passionate about, living under the water all the time.
Stereo. Well, and sometimes, here's what I say. If, you get down on yourself and bitter, it's better to walk away, and take another shot at it. It's better to kind of just remove yourself from it. So I had to get out of that club scene, out of that I wanted thing, and just be a dude that wrote songs and had a day job, and it was therapeutic for me because I was able to humble it down and go, you're not this club star anymore. You're not a nightclub star. You sell stereos. And you write damn good songs.
Right.
And so, you see what I mean?
That's
you strip it away. Sometimes when you want it so hard, you got to act like you don't want it. You got to go, wait a minute. Well, let God decide this. you know, and I think that was just God's way of humbling me.
Well, you were humble to the point of hanging up the shoes and hanging up the drum set and coming home with the keyboard.
Yep.
You call your dad. This is my understanding.
Yep.
Correct me when I'm wrong. And you say, Dad, I'm done. I'm coming home. And what did Dad say back?
He said, John, don't stop believing. And I went, whoa. And I had my lyric book out next to me, and I was like, okay, I'm writing this down. So I wrote it down, and I kept doodling. He kept talking, listen, I'll send you money to get you through. My dog had gotten hit by a car. It was so crazy. And, she nearly died. She was a Great Dane. And $900 vet bill. I'm just like, and the vet was cool. He like, you can make the payments, kind of thing. And
right.
So my dad said, well, I'll send you the money. You can pay me back. So that was cool. But he said, you stay put. We have a vision. We have a dream. And he said the greatest blessing is just around the battle. Just battle. Continue. He said, it's coming, and so I did. He sent me the money, and of course I paid him back every dollar, but I continued to write,
right.
And I hooked up with this guy, Robbie Patton, who was also sent by God, by the way, and he calls me out of the blue and says, man, I really love your album that you made in Bearsville. I said, you do? No, I think we made 5,000 copies, Well, that's great. Let's write, So I go to his house and I see this successful songwriter living in Coldwater Canyon. I'm like, oh, it's another guy that's doing pretty great.
Yes.
When's my great coming, And we wrote a bunch of songs, and then there was an audition that came up in L.A., and it was the Babies. So he looks at me and he goes, oh, darling, you need to go to this audition. These lads are lovely, And I said, but they wear makeup and they got earrings. And he goes, don't worry, you're a rocker. You'll be fine. You sit in. Just do it for me, And very sweet guy. And I go, okay. So he did. And it was like 2 months of auditioning. I went in pretty successfully, auditioned all their stuff. They ended up wanting to do all this Wilson Pickett. John was in this Wilson Pickett thing. So he wanted to, I knew all these songs, and Mustang Sally and all this. And I could stay with them on all of it. So they were impressed. So at the end of the thing, they said, well, do you have any songs you wrote? And I said, yeah, I have this song called Stick to Your Guns, which is another father, my dad said on another phone call, Stick to Your Guns.
It's in the book.
He had all these isms, and I always write a song, about it. And I played the song Stick to Your Guns, and that's what got me the job.
The Babies rock. I mean,
Yeah.
I would imagine many of our listeners and viewers they may not be familiar with the band, but you guys cranked some really worthwhile music that is still worthwhile today.
We played with some of the greats. We were with AC/DC, we used to open for, the Styx Band. We opened up for Blue Oyster Cult, Journey, of course. Did a lot of that. I think we opened up for just about everybody, for a while. We were on all the jams and stuff, and it was good times. I remember playing at the LA Coliseum for 100,000.
Do you ever, when you're more experienced now in the business, so I would imagine when you play Busch Stadium tomorrow night, you will recognize you belong.
Yeah.
You belong in that space. Is there a time, though, when you walk into the Coliseum for the first time, everyone's there to see AC/DC or Journey, whoever it is, and you are playing keyboard for the Babies, and you're like, dude, I'm looking around, I do not belong in this space.
No.
Did you ever have that feeling?
No, it's funny, John, because the very first show with the Babies, I felt vindicated. I felt like I earned this, I belong here. I belong on this big stage in front of 10,000. Amen. Thank you, I would thank God for that, because I'll tell you, I felt right at home, because I knew that all of that work and all that rejection and all the promises and all that stuff that would lead somewhere. And, it was kind of an affirmation from my father's prophecy,
Your dad, I mean, we'll come back to him again and again, but
It's just a stepping stone.
yeah, I mean, what a visionary.
That's what he told me. So I'm in the Babies, and he goes, John, it's just a stepping stone. I'm like, what do you mean, Dad?
Well, he's right.
He was.
You start hanging out with this little rock band that's already rocking. I mean, Journey's killing it already.
Right.
They have a wonderful band, and they are together.
Yeah.
And then there's
Platinum
you.
seller, platinum.
Right? So how was the keyboardist of the Babies eventually picked up by Journey?
It was a tour where we opened up for Journey, and were making a live album captured, and they loved Union Jack's the record I had worked on with John in the band, and so they had us open up for Journey. So I remember meeting them the first time in San Diego. We were at the old Dome there, and I had roller skates on. I used to roller skate before and after sound check just to kind of get a feel of the place. Usually, it was just a way for me to get going and look around and I like to see the whole arena and see what it looked like over here and over here. So I remember Journey sound checking and hearing this voice and watching this leader lead these guys through sound check. I mean, he was unbelievable. And then I heard the guitar and it was like, okay, and then they harmonized so good, and I'm like, wow, this is a whole nother level. And this is the guy that played Black Magic Woman. This is Greg Raleigh. They've got quite a thing going on, and something about it was very captivating for me, and I wanted to become friends with them, and so we did, and I got to know the manager, and then I get to find out that Greg Raleigh's going to retire, and they're looking for a keyboard player, and they drop it on me one night in a car, like, what's it going to be when you're Journey's keyboard player? I'm like, what do you mean? Oh, nothing, and so it was this hint of, and I knew John had already told everybody he was going to go solo. He was done with the Babies. We were so in debt. There was no getting out of that one. So he had a terrible accident with his ACL. He tore it on a cable and was out of commission for a good 6 months. So I get a phone call in the we had a Dr. Pepper commercial come up. It saved us for the rent money, because we didn't have any money. We had to end a tour. We did this commercial. They gave us $30,000 for it. It came out really great. We all got our rent money, and then I get this phone call, and it's Journey. And how does it feel to I hear it again? I'm like, what do you mean? Well, where's the audition? Oh, yes. There is none. You're it. You're it. And we want you to come and help us make the new album in January.
And the new album is called what?
Escape. So that's a theme of my life. It's funny because I escaped the fire. I escaped death a couple times, where I should have been dead. And, and now I look back at any of these failed marriages, you escape that, and escape's been a theme of the book, it's crazy.
So has the song Don't Stop Believing, which was given to you by your dad.
Right.
But then you ultimately had to figure out what to do with it. Right. And this is going to be one of the first songs that you write for your new band.
Well, it's interesting. I brought in Open Arms too, with Steve, and then I think we pieced the rest of it together. We were just jamming, and it was really old school. We'd all get together, play, and try to figure something out. Mother, Father, all those songs on Escape were all sort of a co-op.
Talk about the lyrics to Don't Stop Believin'. Yeah. We know where the title came from, but even...
Well, here's the deal. Perry comes to me the last day of rehearsal and said, I think we need another song. We need one more. We're missing one tune. And he said, what else do you got in that book of yours? And I said, I don't know. So I went home, and I was staying in the Visadero area, I remember, and I had a Wurlitzer piano with a skylight above me, and I took my book out and I saw Don't Stop Believin', and I went, Perry would sing that. He would definitely want to sing that. I just got to come up with a melody that'll soar, So I had his voice in my head, and I just started, the melody, and had the chords, and the whole thing just fell into place. So I brought it in the next day.
So the music came first before the lyrics.
And he was the leader of that session that day. He said, all right, well, these are great chords. I said, what's the verse going to be? He said the same chords. He said, but you're going to disguise them with your rolling eighth note thing that you do, that Jonathan Cain thing. Just do that Jonathan Cain rolling right hand, Okay, Steve. So I would do this, And then all of a sudden, Neil, out of the blue, comes up with his bass line. Boom,
Right.
boom, 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 boom. And then he starts going, dicka, 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 dicka. And then I said, okay, what about the chorus? He goes, not yet. So in the end, by the end of the day, we wrote a song that only had a chorus that happened at the end. He goes, it's great, John. Everybody's going to want to play it over and over again because we don't wear that chorus out. I was like, that's genius. I like that. Cool. And we had a pretty good B section, you know, strangers waiting up and down the da 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 da. And that was Neil. Came up with those great chords. And so it was really, again, an improv. It's a
Right.
Marty Scorsese improv session, you know, where Steve Smith came up with this incredible drum beat. Now we have this song, and Perry's just scatting. You know, we don't have any lyrics except for the chorus. And the next day, I go to his house, which we always would do. When I have my cassette, I would record everything faithfully on this cassette machine, the JVC. It was like, I think it was on the cover of Hall & Oates record. I remember it was this great JVC. And I hit play, and I heard Neil playing that. Ticka, 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 ticka. I go, that sounds like the train.
Right.
You know, like that song, Midnight Train to Georgia. So I go, Steve, what if it was a midnight train going anywhere? He's like, ah. And then I said, you know what? Maybe this is like Jack and Diane. Maybe we need a
Yeah, right.
small
Two
town
characters.
girl, city boy, yeah. And maybe it's about Sunset Boulevard in 1972. I have fond memories. Oh, really? Tell me. So I told him about, you know, Laurel Canyon and Wolfman Jack and going down on Friday nights to see the menagerie of all these different people that would, you know, hustlers and
Smoky bar.
dreamers and you name it, you know, record guys and film guys. And, you know, you had the Whiskey A Go-Go, you had the Starwood, you had La Dome, where all the deals were made, you had the Rainbow Room. These are places that were like still, you know, I lived it. I lived it for 8 years. And I sort of shared it with them. And I said, now, they're going there. That's their destination. And they're not going to stop believing that they can find their dream come true, you know. And so when we wrote the line, a singer in a smoky room, the smell of wine and cheap perfume, Whiskey A Go-Go.
How about
Or
that?
the Starwood. And, you know, Steve was really receptive to it, the idea of Sunset Boulevard, because he had played clubs. He had been the drummer in all these bands for clubs for years, you know, so it was a big deal. He really received it, and he came into agreement. And the two of us, you know, penned a classic, you know, just in that afternoon. It was just one afternoon. Amazing.
When you pen a classic and you jam it out, you record it once, you know, it's still highly unlikely 4 decades later anyone's going to care about it.
Right.
Did you have a vision like, no, man, this thing's going to go big?
Well, you know, it didn't go big as a single.
Yeah, right.
It didn't really, because Michael Jackson was right there, you know, with all of his stuff, and people
Still top 10, right? I
It
mean,
went number 9. I think that's as high as it got. But we knew something special about the song, and Neil even looked at me when we were sequencing the album. We all agreed that it should have been the first track.
have you ever played a concert without playing that song?
No,
Subsequently,
no.
what is it like tomorrow night being at Busch Stadium? And I think that year you did 130 shows.
Right.
I mean,
That's
craziness, right?
Yeah, 2 legs, yeah.
Unbelievable. But what is it like being there? The stadium's got that murmur that you have at a rock concert. It's between songs. There's another one coming. It's not the end of it. And then you hit that chord with your... Do you know what is it like to be the one that hits the chord and then the entire stadium lights up? What's that anticipation like for the pianist?
It's validating. It's empowering. You know, you smile. You have to smile. I mean, I just smile when I play it. It's like one of those tunes that, you know, I had such a legacy and history to it. Sopranos, Glee, you know, if you write something like that, you did pretty good. So every band wishes they had one, you know, like a Hey Jude, right?
Yeah.
And we got one.
You do have
Pretty
one.
great. 3 generations, it still lasted.
And it almost seems to be getting stronger. It's a really unusual song.
It's very
It's the
unusual.
most downloaded song, I think, from the 20th century, bigger than the Beatles.
Well, it you know, for classic rock right now, it's way up there. I think we got an award for over 5 million spins, and that was years ago. So I can only imagine where it's at now. That song has generated 5 times the amount of income of any one of our songs. It's 5 to 1. That one tune. So you got
well done. Tell your dad thanks for authoring the title of it.
Song. Yeah,
he was right.
Yeah.
What's the hardest part of playing 130 shows with the same guys in the various cities, with the groupies and the roadies and the music and the late nights and the early mornings and the PR that you're doing? What's the most grinding?
You got to balance. You got to give some me time. You give other guys space. You can't be all over them about everything. Your days off are your days off, and usually, like, I would go to the gym, work out, or go golfing or something. Go to the movies, just get away from it, and then come back to it. But it's also about communication. To really keep the lines open. If you see something, Arnell may be struggling with a tune. Let's lose it. We don't need it tonight. He's, he needs to write. So you take that song out because you see it going on. Dealing with tactical problems, mixes, ear monitors, all that stuff. It's part of it. But today, we're lucky because we're staying in great hotels, and we leased a plane, and life is pretty good on that plane. I'll tell you that. Right. We have our own stewardess, and it sure beats the commercial flights.
Well, you weren't always on the private plane at the fancy hotels, but you always had a heart that was open to giving. It came through your book repeatedly. In Cleveland, you meet a little boy named Kenny, and as a little boy myself, I spent a little bit of time in hospital and had a whole lot of really cool people swing by.
Yeah.
Meeting those people elevates your soul and your spirit and your health and the wellness, not only of the patient, but everybody lucky enough to be part of that ripple.
That's right.
You meet this little kid named Kenny, and you wrote about it. Talk about Kenny.
Yeah, Make-A-Wish comes along. They're a new organization. I never heard of them before. It was like 1983. And they sent a letter to management. They gave it to me. You want to do this, this kid wants to meet Journey. It's his wish. He's in a bad way. He's at Cleveland's Children's Hospital. So I said, I think we should go. We have to go to New York anyway to mix Only the Young, which David Geffen had picked for his movie Vision Quest, So we were heading to see Bob Clearmountain in New York, and I said, why don't we parlay that in, and we'll just stop in Cleveland. And it was Ross and Neil and Steve and I think that's the 4 of us. And so we went, and we got there, and he was in a bad way. I'd never seen cystic fibrosis. Just terrible. He looked like he was 30 years old, and here he's only like 14 or 15. Mm-hmm. And so it was my idea to bring the Walkman and the song. And I go, well, here, Kenny, this is our gift to you. There's a 49ers helmet here and a football signed by the 49ers, and we have a song. So he put the Walkman on, and Only the Young starts playing. It's a rough mix that we brought to him, and he starts smiling, his big smile, and he just puts his head back on the pillow, and he dozes off into a coma, and then he passes the next day. Then you go, that was a Holy Spirit moment, because that song should have been on the Frontiers album. That song should have been, and it wasn't. And why? It was his song, and God meant that to be his send-off. It was a deal, because when I struggled with writing that song, it was so hard, and we're still doing it today. It's great, but I didn't know what the lyric was. I just had this tape of Steve yodeling. He's just yodel, yodel, yodel. I'm like, I love this song. What is the title? What is the title? And I remember having it on my kitchen table for a month, playing it over and over again every morning. Something's going to happen.
Right.
And all of a sudden, I hear it. I got it. I called him up and I said, I got it. It's Only the Young Can Say. And so I'm sitting in the hospital room with Kenny, hearing Perry's voice. They're free to fly away. Oh my God. And here is this kid on his deathbed, listening to the last thing he's going to hear on this earth and his journey, singing about him. Pretty great. That's how good God is.
You know, I wish we could drop the mic on that one because it is such an awesome story. It's so full of emotion and truth.
And you know, nothing was sadder than hearing that, you know, he passed. But at least, you know, he got his wish come true. He was the first fan to ever hear that song, and it was his song. And to this
when you
day,
play that, when you play that, you still think of Kenny? You still see that little face?
I stay in touch with his family. I still send little video tributes to his family. We stay in touch. They're huge fans to this day. Mom and Dad were awesome, and they gave us a plaque, a bronze plaque, you know, that had
right.
The story of us going there. And you know, Make-A-Wish now is our big charity. We've contributed over $500,000 now. You know, I raise money I'm going to raise money. Let's see, in Nashville we play tailgate toss, and then I auction off a guitar and a book, and you know. But this year we're pushing $100,000 for Make-A-Wish. So I've stayed true to that calling. You know, when God called us to do that, I said let's continue to be faithful to that spirit. And I'm on the board in Nashville. I'm honorary board member, and I got the Lifetime Achievement Award for Make-A-Wish. So that's a big, you know, deal for me. And those kids, we're going to increase our wish giving this year by, you know, 25%,
right?
Because of Journey and because of the fans and how generous they are, you know.
You know, sometimes you're able to give encouragement, other times you need it. 1987.
Yeah.
All the pouring into the Kennys of the world that you've been loving and serving and singing to and playing for. That starts to come to an end along with just about everything else that matters to you. Take us through 1987.
Yeah, it was tough, man. So, you know, you got divorced. You're facing divorce. My ex-wife and I were not doing well. I knew it was going to be a battle. It wasn't going to be one of those, you know, settle it. It should have been, but it wasn't. You know, and there was certain people involved in influencing it the wrong way. So it went into the millions of dollars, you know. So, but then I find my father's got cancer. He's got 3 months left to live. And I got to go to Phoenix and hang out with him as much as possible and then deal with the divorce. And then Steve Perry decides he's done. He's toast. He says, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I'm just like, okay, that's three punches right in the, you know, in the heart. And it was hard. I mean, I understood it all. I understood it was a test, you know, and you know, divorce is never easy. But that one was tough. And then losing Steve at the end there was like, come on, this can't be happening. But it was, you know, and I had to regroup. Yeah.
For those facing that regroup demand right now, you know, many of our listeners, they never headlined a stadium, and in fact, many have never found love, and many don't have the father that loved them in the first place, they feel. So for those who are listening to this or watching us live on Facebook, what would you say to those of us who just feel completely shut down right now?
That there is a blessing beyond all this struggle. You know, you have a breakthrough beyond all this. I think that every battle that you fight is almost a test. You know, can you endure? And I think, you know, I have Holy Spirit and my Father and Jesus. I mean, along the way, I certainly prayed that year like I never prayed before. You know, I remember sitting up on top of my house. I had this beautiful house in Marin County, and I sat up on a rock where I found a rock, and I sat up there for 2 hours, and I asked God to tell me what to do. Do I sell the house? Do I stay? Where do I go, God? You know, and he said, there's a higher place, John. You can endure this, you know. And you have to think about, listen, I deserve I deserve a break, you know, and it's not coming right now, but it is going to come. And as long, I think, if you keep the hope that let the Lord take you to where you're supposed to go, and I think through prayer, um, let God decide. You know, get yourself out of the way, and you are worthy to ask that question. Where now, God? You know, and that's 87 was a big time for me to come back to my faith. You know, and really really pray, because I was lost. I didn't know what was going on.
There was a movie that I saw quite a long time ago called Patton. And the movie was so long that halfway through we took a break, went outside. The entire audience took a break, went outside, came back in, and we finished the second half. I feel like we could do that right now with my new friend Jonathan Cain, because there's so much here. I mean, we're halfway through the book. So what I would encourage us to do, instead of taking a break and coming back, is either my brother and I can come back some other time and finish strong, or you ought to check out the book Don't Stop Believin. It really is. It's a worthy reading. You open up scabs and wounds and stories, and you go there, and it's
transparent. Yeah, truthful, transparent, and to the point. My wife Paula is a huge influence on me these last 7 years that we've kind of been together, and I have to say that watching her preach and telling her story and her testimony, and then getting me up in front of a congregation and telling my testimony, really opened me up to being a complete man. Like a man that's willing to share his heart, a man that's willing to be transparent, about his faith, about his love, and about his band, and she really is such a heavily, she's a big part of my life, and that I would find her, in my 60s. God has a sense of humor. A guy that wanted to be a priest marries a pastor. And I said I would never get married, and I married her like 3 different ceremonies. And I said I never go to Africa, and I've been to Africa 6 times now. So never say never, that kind of thing.
I feel a song coming on. I think Disney may have already covered it, but Journey can do it better.
Calling in the One.
That's right. Jonathan Cain, it has been a pleasure. We have 7 questions that we wrap up every interview with.
Okay.
And from astronauts to actors to, you name the individuals, overcomers ultimately is the thread that pulls them through. And we have Exhibit A in front of us right now. You are it, man. You are a walking, living, breathing, shining example of overcoming. So question number 1 on the Live Inspired 7 is, what is the best book you've ever read?
Oh, wow. I had a breakthrough, a revelation with the book. I mean, being a Christian, I shouldn't even say this, but Eckhart Tolle wrote a book called The Power of Now. And that shifted me so dramatically. Reading that book, understanding what he was saying about being in the moment was huge.
Okay.
And it resonated, and it changed my life. And I woke up the next morning looking at the world differently, and I'll never forget it. It took me a while to get into it, because it was one of those crazy, reads, and yet he's onto something. He was onto something about the past and the present, and the way it shifts you. Your ego can. He said you're on a dolly, and your ego can take you back to your past and punish you and make you afraid of the future. Mm-hmm. Instead of staying put right where you should be, and I thought, man, this is the best advice I've ever had. So that book would have to be right up there,
Right on. What's one positive characteristic, one trait that you possessed as a little boy up in Chicago that you wish you exhibited as brightly today?
Hopeful. I had a lot of hope. I was a very, almost like an altruist. I believed certainly God loves us all, and all is going to be fine. All is going to be great, And it turned out I was half right,
Right on.
I was half right.
Well, and we're not to the end of the story yet, so I think you're all right.
Yes, sir.
If you're home in Nashville or Chicagoland or anywhere else that you may find yourself, if it caught fire and all living people are out, all living things are out, I know you have a passion for animals, and you were able to run in and grab one item, what one item would you run back in to return with?
Oh, that's a tough question. Probably my computer with all my lyrics on it. Yeah. And my laptops, iPads and all that. Yeah, I'd have to get all that, because most of my songs are there, That would be devastating to lose all that work.
Jonathan, if you could sit on a bench on a gorgeous day overlooking a beach with anybody, living or dead, you got a couple hours up there. Who would you want to have those couple hours with?
Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, huh?
Abe Lincoln. Oh yeah.
An Illinois boy.
Phenomenal.
What would you say to him?
How do you write like that?
Right.
His wisdom. I mean, his words resonate so strong. I got to go up to Lincoln's bedroom recently. They had a White House little what do you call it? You know, it's a showing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we were doing a special ceremony with Paula there, and they had the Gettysburg Address right there, the original one that he wrote, and
Four score. I mean, what a poet.
He really was. He was kind of, you know, way ahead of his time. Amazing guy.
Well, he wrote that on a train, right? Speaking of bringing the train back in.
It'd be great to meet him though.
What's the best advice you've ever received?
Pay attention. Pay attention. That's huge. Like stay in the moment. Pay attention. The same, you know. I've seen a lot of people have conversations that aren't in the conversation. You know, they're kind of drifting off somewhere else.
Right, looking down at the phone.
Yeah, you know, no, and you may miss something. And my father, you know, would always say, "Are you really connecting with everybody, you know, that you meet? Because there's probably some wisdom that you need to take. People don't just meet by accident. There's a reason, you know. So pay attention to what is being said to you, so that you can learn from it." And it was good advice for me.
What would you tell your 20-year-old self?
Oh, you're not always who they say you are. That's what I would say. You're not always who they say you are. You're uniquely unique. So don't be afraid.
Final question, my friend. It has been said that all great people can have their lives summed up in one sentence. How do you want your one sentence to read?
That's a good one. Just, you know, I would say never stop believing. Never stop believing in who you are, you know. You're uniquely you. That would be it. I mean, I'm proof. I didn't stop. I got sidetracked, but never stop believing in who you are. Yeah.
Jonathan Cain, frequently when you meet a celebrity or you meet anybody that you look up to, you walk away from that conversation very disappointed. And man, I've read your book. I've listened to your music. I sang in bars. I think a little bit better than Perry, but that's a different conversation. I've been a fan for a long time, in other words, and I'm leaving this conversation more impressed than I walked into it.
Thank you, John.
You pay attention, and you inspire us to keep believing. So I want to thank you for being part of our Live Inspired podcast.
Thank you for having me.
My friends, that is Jonathan Cain from Journey, among other great bands. This is John O'Leary, and today is your day. Live inspired.
All right.
Dude, peace.
All right. Thanks, John.
Well done, man. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
You got to take a midnight train now, baby.
Well, are we going to do the song, or?
Are you up to it? I don't want
I'm
to.
up to doing it if you want.
Yes, I'm up to having you perform live in our.
Let me get
We're gonna keep rolling. Hey, if you're on Facebook Live with us right now,
get a little more water.
we're gonna get a little more water, and we are gonna take the great Jonathan Cain from this recording studio. This is where we do our recordings, down the hallway into that little glass area, and we're gonna let Jonathan pick the song, and whatever he picks is what we're gonna rock out for just a couple minutes. So if you're tuning in right now, walk down the hallway with us, and let's open up our hearts to Jonathan Cain's music.
We go this way?
Yeah, and I can get you more water if you like. Oops, he's got water for you.
Come on. Oh yeah?
Nice piano.
I have an old stand-up at
I
home.
always tell people, you know, they ask me like, well, what would you buy today? And I said, well, for the money, this is the best piano. For the dollars that you're going to spend, you know. But it's like,
My friends, the clapping is taking place at your homes and computers and laptops. This is Jonathan Cain. That was a beautiful song.
Thank you.
And
It's my story.
in short order, just explain to them what that song means to you as you play it.
You know, it's my life as a writer. I feel that, you know, it's a song for all songwriters, anybody that is a creator, any kind of, you know, artist, that we all have that desire to be remembered. And I finished writing my book and did the interview, and I was driving home to Orlando, and God gave me that, you know, and I just thought of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I came for the big night as I waited in the spotlight, you know. I remember standing backstage thinking I'm going to walk on stage with all my bandmates and get one of the most prestigious musical awards to ever be bestowed upon anybody. And so that's where that lyric came from, you know. And it's just the suffering that, you know, we all quietly have to go through as songwriters, that, you know, it's not something everybody gets, but I thought it needed to be said.
Well, it was said and sung beautifully.
Thank
so,
you.
Again, we want to thank Jonathan Cain for his music, for his heart, for lighting us up to recognize that the struggles aren't the end of it, to don't stop believing, and to recognize that spotlight's coming for us all.
Yeah, leave something behind.
That's right. For this time, my friends, and until next time, this is your day. Live inspired. Dude, so I have an uncle named Drew who's dying, and I found out on the way down here that he's no longer awake.
Oh boy.
And I'm listening to your words, and you sang that for me.
Awesome, thank you. It's